Hello friends, video number 9. At the beginning of the last video, I thought it was going to be the last video. I lied. I decided to break it up into 3 videos. We are in video number 9. We are in the home stretch. We're going to cover the second last essay that William James talks about in this book. It's a compilation of his work. He was the founder of, not the founder, but Pierce was the founder of the term, or coined the term, pragmatism. William James was an exponent of pragmatism. He promoted it, and he talked about it and did essays on it. His view of life, of philosophy, his view of truth was called pragmatism, and what it means is he only believes in those things that are expedient, the things that bring the greatest good, and those things can only be discovered over time. They cannot be determined a priori or ahead of time. According to him, he says there are no absolute truths. It just depends on what works for the individual. It's a bad idea, and that type of thinking led to humanistic atheism, was the offshoot of his way of thinking, and it solidified empiricism, the idea that the only thing that matter are facts, that there's nothing metaphysical, there is no absolute, and so on and so forth. So he had some pretty good ideas, but the way that his ideas were expounded upon and disseminated throughout the philosophical community at the time resulted in the development of atheistic humanism. That's the summation of William James and his legacy. So we're finishing up the book. In this video and the next, I've got this is video number 9. I'm just going to cover briefly his essay called What Makes a Life Significant? And in this essay, he quotes from Tolstoy extensively. And I'm just going to pull out, and also Robert Louis Stevenson. And so I'm just going to pull out a few of the items that he mentions here. Page 276. He says, it's talking about appreciating the spiritual, because sometimes he does lapse into that area in spite of himself. He says, there I rested on that day with a sense of widening of vision, and with what it is fair to call an increase of religious insight into life. This is after him gaining an appreciation from the last essay. He's gaining an appreciation of observing laborers. So he spends time observing a different class of people than himself. He's part of the intellectual elite. He's part of the wealthy elite. And he spends time with laborers, and he's startled to find out that their lives have value. So he reveals a significant amount of his own snobbery, and it causes him to gain a sense of more religious feeling, so to speak, as he puts it. And there I rested on that day with a sense of widening of vision, and with what is surely fair to call an increase of religious insight into life. He boldly claims here now, in God's eyes, the difference of social position, of intellect, of culture, of cleanliness, of dress, which different men exhibit, and all the other rarities and exceptions on which they so fantastically pin their pride, must be so small as practically quite to vanish. And all that should remain is the common fact that here we are, a countless multitude of vessels of life, each of us pent into peculiar difficulties with which we must severally struggle by using whatever of fortitude and goodness we can summon up. So here, William James is revealing his own snobbery, and he's dumbfounded at the fact that other people's lives are just as valuable as his own. And he goes so bold as to speak on God's behalf. He says, in God's eyes, the differences of social position must be so small that it vanishes. Well, I should say so, William James, you dink. That can be summed up in the simple phrase that God is not a respecter of persons. If he had read his scriptures, he would know that. Whereas he makes this as some great discovery. Wow, he's amazed to discover that the working class are just as valuable in their sincerity as he is. At this rate, he goes on and describes more about that. At this rate, the deepest human life is everywhere, is eternal. Wow. Okay. Good for you, James. Yet always, you must confess, this leveling insight tends to be obscured again, and always the ancestral blindness returns. And he goes on, and he says that because we have this ancestral blindness of not caring for our fellow human beings, then every once in a while, a new leveler in the shape of a religious prophet needs to arise. And here he goes off the rails again, showing his spiritual ignorance. He says it could be a Buddha, the Christ. The first time he mentions that word in the book, by the way. Some St. Francis, some Rousseau or Tolstoy to dispel our blindness. So he puts significant writers on the same level as the Buddha, or as he calls, I'm not even going to repeat what he says because it's so pathetic and so ignorant. He goes on to describe Tolstoy's leveling philosophy. So Tolstoy taught him how to regard all men as equals. And he, again, shows his ignorance talking about those of our own class. Don't forget, this was written at a time when class was very important, these distinctions between the rich and the poor. And he talks about spending time with those from a class below himself, saying, the more I entered into their life, the more I loved them, and the more it became possible for me to live too. It came about not only that the life of our society, in other words, our upper society, of the learned and of the rich, disgusted me. More than that, it lost all semblance of meaning in my eyes. In other words, because he spent time with the lower classes, he became disgusted with his own class, which is probably a lie. He's exaggerating his response, saying, oh, this guy would have been fit right in with the hypocrisy of today. He gives a big long quote from Robert Louis Stevenson's work. Again, I believe that is from the book which I mentioned earlier, Across the Plains. That would be a good book to read, I guess. And how are we doing for time? Okay, so we are in video number 9. We're talking about the essay, What Makes a Life Significant? And he quotes another gentleman, Walter Wyckoff, and Nansen. He describes dealing with these working class individuals, that their souls worked and endured in obedience to some inner ideal that mystified him. He talks about Tolstoy again, Bondaroff, and Phillips Brooks. Phillips Brooks he quotes extensively from, all about the different ways that humans ascribe importance and significance to their lives in spite of hardship and toil. Deepest, he says, the deepest significance in life does seem to be its character of progress. The idea of continual improvement, he says, is what gives life significance. He says, James says, there must be some sort of fusion, some chemical combination among these principles for a life objectively and thoroughly significant to result. He makes it sound like he really doesn't know what makes life significant. He just explores it through different individuals, through their work, through their attitudes, and so on and so forth. So he travels through his thought experiments in this essay, What Makes a Life Significant, and he finally comes to the conclusion that there should be a willingness to live and let live. So that phrase is over 120 years old, and I'm sure it was mentioned long before William James as well. But there you go. There's a common phrase today: live and let live, was what the point William James was trying to make in this essay. What makes a life significant? I'll have to give him credit that he did try to espouse attributing a value to the classes that were below him, so to speak. So he says that, even these people that are all they have to look forward to is work and, sweat of their brow, torturous labor and survival. He says they should be ascribed as much value as anybody. So I'll give him that. But he says it in such a condescending manner. It's pretty horrific. So that's it for video number 9, covering the essay, What Makes a Life Significant. And I'm going to finish off with one more video. Now, video number 10 is going to be the last video. It's on the moral equivalent of war. And these videos, I'm only putting out one per day. So this is going to be scheduled out. And so if you're watching this, I really appreciate your patience. I'm going to try and move on and find something of more significant value to you, the viewer, because I want to provide you value. I'm hoping that I've saved you the pain and agony of having to go through 300 pages of small text that's barely divided up. Look at the size of the paragraphs. I mean, you can see that it's a very difficult read. My eyes are shot from going through it, but I want to distill it down to present to you the significant points that may be of some type of value to you, so that you don't have to go through and read all this stuff. Or if you are, to give you a different sounding board that you can compare your thoughts if you're reading William James to my impression on it, and maybe that'll help you. My impression is not coming as an instructor. It's just coming as a fellow citizen of life, citizen of the world, and giving you my direct thoughts of how it strikes me. But it is good to know, right, that who this guy was and what he is known for. He is known for pragmatism, and he's known as a great philosopher. And so what makes him great is to try and understand and read and see the perspective of somebody that lived over 100 years ago and was very popular in his day. So again, thank you very much for watching. I love you. God bless you. I hope you have a fantastic day. We'll see you tomorrow in the final video, video number 10, covering the moral equivalent of war. Talk to you soon. Take care. Bye-bye.